All rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call to order the Town of Hudson Regular Town Council meeting for July 21st at 6 p.m. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Stadler? Here. Councilmember Nall? Here. Councilmember Chavez? Here. Councilmember Maestas?
Here.
Councilmember Hammack?
Here.
Councilmember Warren?
Here.
Mayor Hargis?
Here. Are there any additions to the agenda?
No, there are not.
Point in the agenda for citizens' comments. Anybody wishing to address the council on anything not already stated for public hearing on the agenda may do so at this time. Let the record show that there's no citizens in the building or online. Consent agenda. Everybody get a chance to go through the consent agenda, and if there are no questions, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Warren?
Yes.
Councilmember Maestas?
Yes.
Councilmember Nall?
Yes.
Councilmember Stadler?
Yes.
Councilmember Hammack?
Yes.
Mayor Hargis?
Yes. Presentation, fiscal year 2020 audit presentation, Lorraine Trotter.
Hello, Mayor and council members. Nice to see you again. Some new faces too. I'm here tonight to go over the audit with you. Each year it is required of every municipality to be audited by an independent auditor. And that auditor this year was Prospective Business Solutions, and Uli Keeley's was the main auditor and owner of that business. I'm with Professional Management Solutions. We do financial and management consulting for cities and towns, and we function as your accountant. And so we help get the town ready for the audit, work closely with Charity and her staff, and try to ensure that everything goes smoothly. And I'm happy to report that it did. So I believe you have in your packets electronically a copy of the audit report. And what I like to do with this presentation is to walk through it enough with you so that you can feel like you've fulfilled your fiduciary role as council members of understanding how the year ended and how the audit went. And then if you're particularly interested in anything, you can ask questions or go back with me later or with Charity. And if that's enough for you, you can put it on your shelf or hit the delete button and be done with it and feel like you've fulfilled your role. So in the packet, I assume it's the same as the printout that you gave me.
Yes.
So it started with what's called the communication letter that comes from the auditor. And this is a letter that isn't released to the public per se. It's the auditor works for you as a council and has certain things they need to report back to you on. And this is saying whether they found any significant problems, whether there were significant internal control problems, significant issues. So essentially they are not saying that every single transaction you did during the year is perfect. They're saying that they sampled enough of them that they can tell you their professional opinion that your financial statements and all the totals are reasonably accurate and therefore can be relied upon to make decisions about the finances of the city. So here they had no significant accounting matters. They didn't have disagreements with management, that type of thing. So the first letter is good. Then we get into the town of Hudson's basic financial statements, which are what you call the audit, or what are the annual financial statements. And after the table of contents, it always starts with the auditor's official opinion letter. And they tell who they are on the first page and what their responsibility is. And the key of this opinion is the top sentence on the second page of the letter. This is, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of, and it lists out all the items that are included in the financial statements. So that's what's called a clean opinion. There's no qualifications, like, except we have to qualify the statement that such and such wasn't, correct. This is a clean opinion with an unqualified opinion. Page Roman numeral 1 is the management's discussion and analysis. And this is a required component of the financial statements for management to say what all these numbers mean and how they interpret them and what they intend to do with them. And so the financial highlights here can be a quick reference if you ever get a call from a reporter, like what's the financial status of the town? How did things go during 2020 with COVID? You could refer to these bullet points and say, we're in good shape. Here's some highlights. The net position of the town increased by almost 3 million during the year. At December 31st, the town's governmental funds reported 16.8 million, and that was an increase of 3 million over the previous year, like a 22% increase. And the town's general fund alone went up over $250,000, doubled from what it had been. And the town's water and sewer funds decreased due to big contributions to the Northern Colorado Water Conservation District, primarily. And that will benefit the town in future years. So the highlights here are good. Then it explains who's in your financial reporting entity. Sometimes there's a question if there's a housing authority or something else nearby, if that's part of the city or the town. And here it specifies that you have, and the library is a special designation in the state statutes, and it is shown in these financial statements as part of the town. You are responsible for it. It's a blended component unit of the town. Governmental funds and proprietary funds are the two types of funds you have. So when you're looking at your budgets, you're talking about the water fund or the general fund. All these funds that you have in here have different ways that they're accounted for based on what the government does. So government in general, for the general fund that provides, street maintenance and police services, doesn't sell anything. You essentially have sales taxes and property taxes that finance those general activities. They aren't sold by person to anyone. Whereas water and wastewater services are sold customer by customer based on their usage and needs. And so those funds that have something to sell or run like a business are accounted for like a regular business is down the street. But governmental funds aren't. You're not measuring whether you made a profit or loss and you're going to stay in business or not. You essentially have to stay in business, and you have to provide certain services even if things aren't going so well. So making sure that things are going well is what you're looking at to see, did we get enough money during the year? And if so, do we have enough to carry over to next year to provide these services next year and to keep providing them as we grow? So that's that part on these pages 1 and 2 that talk about proprietary funds versus governmental funds. When you get to small Roman numeral 3, it shows, instead of one bottom line, it shows governmental activities, business activities, and a total, because governments are different from other businesses. There's not one bottom line. Each of these two types of businesses we just discussed are accounted for different ways. And here in the net position table, it shows you for the current year and the past year, the audit year and the year before that. And it also shows the capital assets of the town, both for the governmental and the business type. So you would expect for water and wastewater that are your business types, you got a lot of capital. You've got treatment plants and pipes. That's a lot of capital assets. For the governmental activities, you have capital assets like buildings and streets and sidewalks that you can't really sell to someone else. They're not worth to a city what they would be worth to a business that could sell its assets to someone else. And that's why the governmental accounting is different usually, but here on these pages, it shows those assets as well. And you see that in the bottom right-hand figure, second from the right, actually, for the 2020 total is that 36 million in net position that you had at the end of 2020. About half of that is the investment in those capital assets. But you have unrestricted amounts of 15 million that can be used for the ongoing services you need to provide. The rest of this management's discussion and analysis talks more individually about the different funds. And if you look at the chart and graph on page 5, it shows for the governmental activities, and those are the ones that are like the police services and the street maintenance, you see the big brown area is operating grants and contributions that come from shared revenues from the state. And the big green area is your property taxes, and the purple area is your sales taxes. So almost all of your income is coming through governmental sources, whether it's grants, shared revenues, sales taxes, or property taxes. And so when you look at the bottom section, it shows what program revenues are there for each of these types of services you're providing. It's only the library where the revenues are exceeding the expenses that come from the programs. So in the general government, the program revenues would be like a fee for development fees, as opposed to all those taxes that aren't considered program revenues. Business type activities on page 6 shows you it's a little different. That big blue area is charges for services. Whatever the customers are using and getting billed for is going to be the major revenue of those funds on the utility bills. However, when you look at the expenses and the program revenues, those revenues are in brown down there, and they aren't sufficient to pay for the expenses. So we're going to look at that in a little while and talk about that. You can look at the rest of this as you wish, and when you get to page 8, you see that the Hudson Public Library Fund has all those funds that come from this property tax district. The just went out of my head. The intergovernmental revenue agreement that you have with Highlands Property Library District. So I'm going to move into the statements themselves and get out of that management's discussion and analysis, but it is a good read if you're interested in these types of things. And if you have any students or, again, reporters that come or want to get some background, or say they have to do a report on their town or something, you might have them take a look at that. This can be useful. When you issue debt, the analysts who rate your debt and decide how much your interest rates are going to be, read that information. And pages, regular numerals now, page 1 is the statement of net position. And again, there's the 2 columns for governmental and business type. And again, it has that $36 million figure at the bottom right-hand corner of total net position. This is the actual statement. What was in the management's discussion and analysis was kind of, shortened to roll up to the same figures. And then you have statement of activities showing the program revenues versus the taxes. So let's go over to what you're more used to seeing, and that is page 3. And this is a balance sheet of the governmental funds. So when you look at the financial statements that we prepare each month, if you are looking at those, or when you look at the budget and you see beginning fund balances and ending fund balances, that's what you're used to thinking about. How much money are we starting with? What are we going to get in revenues? What do we have to spend? And what are we going to be left with? And that's what all these governmental funds are measuring. The thing I'll point out on page 3 is under the general fund, that very first figure, cash and investments, there's a dash there, which means you were in a negative cash position for the general fund at the end of the year. But you had receivables that were going to come in to generate cash of almost $3 million that it will come forward. And you guys are improving on your cash position in the general fund from where you were a couple years ago before you did some of your key annexations, particularly with the power plant, that are bringing in revenues that are helping your general fund a lot. If you go to page 5, this is the revenue and expenditure and fund balance page. It's called Statement of Revenues, Expenditures, and Changes in Fund Balances, Governmental Funds. You see the general fund had 2.9 million come in revenues and spent 2.7. So you had even also had some sale of assets, which aren't normal revenues. So going down to the 3rd line from the bottom in the general fund column, you see net change in fund balances up by 263,000. And since you started the year in a negative fund balance, waiting for those annexations to be counted for your property taxes, it really vaulted you out of the cellar fast to a fund balance ending of 207,000. So that's very good. These numbers will be slightly different from what we looked at in the management's discussion and analysis, where they included the capital assets. The rest of this book is done the regular old way of governmental funds don't show the capital assets because you really aren't going to sell them. Maybe a car here and there, but not your infrastructure and your buildings. The Property Tax Special Revenue Fund, looking at the bottom three lines again, it went up by $946,000 to over $1 million. The paving sales tax went up by $412,000 to almost $2 million. The Hudson Public Library went up by $1.3 million to over $11 million. Now that you have opened the Keensburg branch, you will have additional expenditures that you haven't had in the past that will use some of these revenues. But assuming that those revenues are more like yours, $500,000 a year, you may still be increasing this fund balance as you go forward. So keep that in mind, how to use that and how it's going to play out with your other needs, especially if you have to open another branch in La Bowie or elsewhere. Then you have on the next page, which is unnumbered because it's a continuation of page 5, other governmental funds, and there's several more that aren't major funds. And so they aren't presented here with their own column, but they're delineated in the back of this book, and we'll see that at the end. So those are the governmental funds, the ones where you're measuring the fund balance. When we talk budget, you're wanting to look and see if that fund balance is the right size. And you want to see if you have enough in reserve, that's your fund balance, to get you through a hard time. And I've talked to you in the past about with small towns in area where a tornado could take out a lot of revenue bearing properties in a night. You want to make sure that you have enough fund balance to get you through until FEMA helps you or until those places get rebuilt and they start to generate revenue again. So back on that page 5, in the general fund, you have an ending fund balance of $207,000. As I mentioned, that's definitely going in the right direction, but your expenditures per year are $2.7 million. So if you suddenly had no revenues coming in from sales and property taxes, you would need more than that in your fund balance for general fund to get you through. And again, there are emergency funds available, but you want to get to a point where you don't have to rely on those and don't need them immediately, and you can get things done before those funds come in. And that's what you want to keep your eye on when you're considering expenditures year to year. The other funds are separate because they're restricted to their use. They have their own fund because they were approved by elections or some other documentation that says these revenues can't be used for any old thing. They can only be used for paving projects and debt service or for special improvement projects or for the library. You can't pass them around. So the general fund is the key. Let's go to page 9. And page 8, that's where the funds are shown for the water and wastewater. They are proprietary or enterprise funds run like a business. You show your operating revenues at the top and your operating expenses, including depreciation, which isn't a cash out the door, but it's an expense because at some point you'll have to replace all those lines and plants. And it shows net operating loss for both operations, where your operating revenues aren't enough to cover your operating expenses, including depreciation. And so the rate studies that you do are really important to figure that in and say, how are we going to cover our operations with our fees? And what should our rates be? And how often should we raise them? Should we wait every 5 years and then really raise them? Or every year gradually raise them as costs go up? So even though you have a net operating loss, if you keep going down, there's some other things that are called non-operating revenue and expenses that impact that. And then you get your tap fees. And those get added in, but those aren't supposed to be used for operating. Those tap fees are in order to have enough money to build the lines to a new property when it's developed. So the change in net position on both of those funds was negative during 2020. And again, part of it's because you had to make some big payments to the water districts, but part of it has to do with the rates and fees not covering the operating expenses. So keep that in mind going forward. Moving on to page 10, the summary of significant accounting policies. I'm just going to walk through the titles of these things here, but if you want to know something and no one's around to ask, or again, if you have a reporter or a student ask you a question, it might be in these notes of the financial statements. This is where, again, it's talking about who's in your reporting entity besides who's in town hall, and it's the Hudson Library, and it tells you what the basis of accounting is. Page 12 tells you what those major funds are that you have and what they're for. The property tax special revenue fund accounts for the collection of property taxes established for capital improvements and related debt. That's all it can be used for. All these are defined there. Going to page 13 and on, it tells you what some of the line items mean that are in the financial statements. So if you see, well, what exactly is a receivable, or what does this mean, prepaid item? How do we depreciate our capital assets over what period of time? It tells you there. And there's more definitions throughout here. So I'm going to skip forward to page 19. And this tells you about your budget process and what's required for all Colorado municipalities, and your budget calendar and how it has to work. Going to page 21, you see what the town's allowed to invest in. Sometimes you'll have a neighbor stop you and say, man, why don't you guys take some of that money and invest it in Amazon or something and make some return on that? There's requirements and there's restrictions to what can be done with public funds, and they're listed here. And you make use of what's on page 22, local government investment pools, which are sanctioned investing corporations for municipal governments, where all the small towns and the big cities can pool their money and get a higher rate than you would get if you invested on your own in an instrument that you chose at a local bank, for instance. So that's good. Page 23 shows you all about those capital assets. I mentioned how much they're worth. Looking at the page 23 total for the governmental activities, and this is the town hall and the streets, et cetera. You've got land improvements. The infrastructure is the streets and sidewalks. You've got buildings, machinery, and equipment. Shows the depreciation on them, and they're worth 13.4 million. The next page shows for the water and the wastewater systems, 6.8 million in water system and 9.4 in the wastewater system. And after depreciation, they're currently, quote unquote, worth 11,559,000. Page 25 shows your debt. So if you want to know what your outstanding debt is, it's always in the audit, and it shows for the governmental fund types first and then for the business. So you have those 2016 street bonds that you used when you finished paving the streets on the other side of I-76. And you have some capital leases for equipment that is described here for police vehicles. On page 26, you show several bonds and loans for your water and wastewater activities. And there's a total of 4.169 owed there. The rest of this shows general and very lengthy information about the pension plan that your police officers are part of and what you do for post-employment benefits for your other employees. Claims, judgments, TABOR, the impact of the COVID lockdown, et cetera. But let's go to the back of the book on page 40. And here's where you start looking at budget to actuals. And as we mentioned, the auditors are looking at what you do partly to see if you comply with what your budgets were. And so they look at the original budget, the final budget, if there was a amendment, what your actual expenditures were. So it's the expenditure line that's the most important, to make sure that your budget exceeded your expenditures, and it did by $1 because you made sure that that happened. The bottom line on this page 40 is interesting because your final budget had hoped that you would have a ending fund balance of 482,000, but it turned out to be 207,000. And you're still in a positive situation on your budget compliance. There's similar documents for your other funds, the special revenue funds, the paving sales tax, the Hudson Public Library, each have their own page. Then there's information about the pension plan again on pages 44 and 45. At the back of the book is where they rolled up those smaller funds that I told you didn't have their own column in the front. And so here are the rest of your funds that aren't considered major funds. It's the Sales Tax Capital Improvement Fund, the Capital Reserve Fund, Conservation Trust Fund where the lottery money goes, the park impact fees, facilities impact fees, and street impact fees. And that's what rolls up into that other non-major fund column in the front. There's the balance sheet that shows the assets and liabilities, and on page 47, similar information for the revenues and expenditures. Then for those non-major funds and non-major special revenue funds, the budgetary comparison schedules are shown also. So that may be more than you ever wanted to know, but I do think it's important for you to know and be aware, and to have things ring a bell when you're in the budget process, or if you hear a complaint about why are our rates going up, there's reasons for it, and you can hearken back to these numbers to substantiate that. The very last item in here is a state required report regarding the Highway User Trust Fund that shares taxes from, I believe it's gasoline sales, with the all the municipalities across the state from the state. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any question. Oh, in the very back, I almost missed this. There's another letter from the auditor on your internal controls. They did not find any deficiencies in your internal controls that they consider to be material weaknesses. And that's pretty good when you're a small town, because it's hard to separate the duties and have checks and balances. And you've done a good job with what you can here. Charity supervises several other people who do certain things, and then somebody else who's generally my company or someone like me is reconciling your bank statements to make, and that person is best if they cannot sign checks or issue checks or run payroll, to have a third party or a third person do that. So there's different ways to handle that, but the auditors were satisfied with the way you're doing it now. Thank you for your attention. I know this is not everyone's favorite topic, but if it is something that you're interested in or want to know more, please feel free to ask now or get in touch with me. I'd be happy to give you some more information.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Lorraine? No? Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome.
Okay, moving on, 3A, Resolution 2124, resolution accepting the petition for annexation and establishing September 15th, 2021 as the date of public hearing on the requested annexation of a parcel of unincorporated territory located in the county of Weld, Hudson County Road 49 annexation.
Thank you. I'm also going to talk about 2124 and resolution 2125 generally together. 2125 is approving the annexation agreement. 2124 is actually the eligibility determination. The eligibility determination gets you started to moving through review, referral, public notice, and all of that. The annexation agreement that's before you actually has some conditions that Weld County's brought forward. So it's not normal that we would do an annexation agreement at this time, but it is probably a good thing since there are these conditions in here you may want to be aware of before we get into all of the other proceedings. So if it's okay with you, I'll kind of couple those topics together. So there is a brief synopsis for the eligibility determination. So I'm talking about 21-24 right now. In your request for council action, the proposed annexation includes a tract of right-of-way that's part of Weld County Road 49. And I'll give you a description. It's basically from 52 up to the Ireland Reservoir where town limits start now. It is right-of-way, but it's in the county, so it's the county's right-of-way. So that's kind of why, that's why we have to annex it. And that's also why we're working with Weld County and Weld County Board of County Commissioners. So in summary, there have been moving pieces and a change in process direction. That's what it says in your RCA. But now we're officially starting the process. We've gotten something from the Board of County Commissioners that says they've done the petition. They're ready to start the annexation process, and it brought the petition forward to us and has actually passed a resolution to give their okay to go through this process, which is also in your packet. So as I said, the first step of annexation proceedings is after we've got their application, we do a notice of annexation, which you got on the 7th of this month. Charity did her official notice. I believe it was the end of the meeting on the 7th. So that was your notice that you received the annexation, and then we received all the materials for the annexation, and now we're at eligibility. The next steps after if you've determined the project or the application is eligible for annexation into the town, like I said, it's going to include more notice. We're going to do the mailings to the neighbors. We're going to have our staff reports and public hearings. The zoning component of all annexations go to Planning Commission. Annexation, of course, is ultimately your decision, but we'll start that process and noticing for those meetings too. Let's see here. I just want to make sure I caught everything for the eligibility. So the actual hearing for the annexation itself, pending the eligibility determination, would occur on September 15th. That date is in your packet as well. The Planning Commission recommendation for the zoning would happen the week before their September regular meeting on the 8th. To kind of switch gears to the annexation agreement, it is a typical annexation agreement with some conditions, and I want to read those to you so that you're aware of what they are. They're in your RCA, but they are from the agreement with the county, Weld County. It says first, A, the town will not impose any weight limitation applicable to vehicles using the annexed Weld County Road 49. B, the town will not impose any limitation on vehicular access or use of the annexed Weld County Road 49 so as to specifically exclude farm or ag vehicles and equipment. And that essentially says that if you have farm equipment, you can be on that road. The town shall have authority to approve or deny all future access onto the annexation portion of Weld County Road 49. Current ingress and egress to the annexed Weld County Road 49 for current uses will continue to be allowed for such purposes. The intent being that annexation shall not impair or affect the current access unless egress points are abandoned, which means somebody quits using them for the purposes that they were allowed for. And that basically says that the driveways that are there now and the accesses that are there now would continue to be allowed there once annexed into the town. Does anybody have any questions about process or kind of where we're at in it, or the two resolutions independently themselves? That was a very brief explanation, but in this process, we're really at the beginning. We haven't dug into the application materials like we would a normal review of a development application because of the set procedures that are required for annexation. We would start that after the eligibility determination. So I can't really talk to you about the particulars of the survey or the plat or anything like that. This is really more about whether or not we found the application eligible for annexation, which we have provided some points of. We've got the application materials, we've got the annexation plat, we've got what we need to move forward. Then in addition is the annexation agreement, which is the component that the Board of County Commissioners asked to come with the eligibility determination.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So on 2125, B and C, don't they seem to be opposed to each other? One says we won't impose, and then one says we have authority to approve or deny future access.
So I think if I could use some real life examples, I think what A says is we're not going to limit trucks from using that road. And B says we're not going to limit farm equipment or tractors. So they are, in terms of weight, very similar, but I think the whole right to farm component of Weld County is coming out in item B. So I think that's likely why they pulled it out specially.
But then C says we have
The right to-
ability to approve or deny all future access.
Right.
So one is current access. You can't eliminate a current access that a private property owner has to the road. But going forward, when there's applications for new access, it's all our jurisdiction.
Okay. Okay.
The
That makes-
old stuff would be okay as is. Anything new, though, requires us to say okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Explain that way. That makes sense.
If I could add one other thing, because this is weird, to be approving the agreement before you approve the annexation.
Yeah.
This is a requirement of Weld County. They have a playbook, if you will, for when they give portions of right-of-way to municipalities. And so this is their playbook that they're not going to even give you an annexation petition unless you understand the terms and conditions for annexation at the front end. So that's why you have the petition, you have the setting of the hearing, and you have approval of the annexation agreement, but it is contingent upon actually annexing the property. So if on September 15th, you decide you don't want to annex the property when you have the public hearing, then the approval of the agreement tonight doesn't matter.
Okay, because that's what I was curious about is how can we have set September 15th for the hearing, but we're approving the annexation tonight?
Yeah, you are approving it contingent on approving the annexation on the 15th, but the
Based
Weld
on
County,
what Weld County wants us to do.
this is their playbook for how they ask, how they petition when it's right of way.
Completely conditional on the approval of the annexation. Right.
Okay. So does anybody else have any other questions? As now it's clear as mud.
It is weird. That's all I can say.
I was going to let Lori say that. Technical term, weird. Yes.
County, yeah. If there are no more questions, I would entertain a motion on 3A.
I make a motion to approve resolution 21-24, resolution accepting the petition for the annexation and establishing September 15th, 2021 as the date of public hearing on the requested annexation of a parcel of unincorporated territory located in the county of Weld, Hudson County Road 49.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now on 3B.
I make a motion to approve resolution 2125, a resolution approving the annexation agreement with Weld County regarding the Hudson County Road 49 annexation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. 3C, discussion town bus.
So I was hoping to have the data for you on what the insurance increase was going to be for us to put a CDL versus a non-CDL bus driver on our insurance. We've been playing phone tag for 4 days, so I don't have that data, but the rest of the information was in the packet for you to look at in terms of what the cost would be for whichever route you go with.
And then I had a question. So have we gotten any outside grants yet? Or is it just the budgeted of the 75?
It's just the budgeted number for the 75.
Okay, well, there's been no outside grants.
Yes.
Are we still pursuing that grant through BNSF or now that
I would have to touch base with
now that Joe
Sophia to
Sloan is gone, we're
see-
not going to get that grant?
I would have to touch base with Sophia to see if she's still pursuing that grant.
Does she even know about it? Because, okay. All right.
And then my other question is with transporting youth and if this library is like we do senior stuff or whatever, do we need to have any special insurance for when we take those kids out and about? Not just saying a CDL driver driving them, I'm saying at the activities in case one of those kids get hurt or something happens.
So yes, and that would be volunteer liability insurance through CIRSA, which I've already added to our quote for our 2022 renewal.
Okay. And do we have an idea, this might be more Maria since Sophia's not here, of how many, activities that you guys want to use this bus for? Because right now you guys don't have a lot of kids doing things. Like your college for kids, you had like 2 kids. So I don't want to go ahead and say yes on a bus right now when we don't know what it's going to be next year since fall and winter's coming. You guys might only go to one event and have 5 kids. It's pointless to get a bus then.
Right,
So-
we have no idea. Even like the turnout of the events versus
Yeah.
the last 2 years, this year and last year versus the first year. It's
Yeah, I just think it's been dwindling down each year. I know last year was due to COVID, but even before that, I just think it's dwindling kind of down. I don't
not
see,
necessarily doing them.
I just don't
That's
see
the
a
new
lot of-
events.
right, but I don't see a lot of kids showing up either. So I don't know if I want to go ahead. I know it's a discussion, but I don't know if I want to discuss any further right now this year, getting a vehicle.
Well, and I think we need to get more numbers too on
Yeah.
seniors, whether they would use it, on any library
Right.
events, whether they would use it. If we can get
Yeah.
some, I don't
So-
even know if we can get numbers.
How about we come back with a cost reflection of what the van would cost with insurance and everything else versus, say, chartering a bus for up to X amount of events a year. And then also go with the numbers of what we're projecting for the events for the coming years.
I think that would be a good idea. Get
Okay.
with Judy on the seniors and with the library. Let's see if we can,
Add an actual list of possible events to that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, because I would love if the town had a bus. I just right now don't
I don't think
see
it's cost effective.
I don't know, feasible or whatever.
I just don't see, I go to a lot of the events. I've been to all of the movies and it's not,
I was gonna ask how the movie went last time.
it's great. I really enjoy it, but there's just not a lot of participation and that's a lot of money to put out for stuff that isn't being utilized.
Yeah.
And it's sitting.
So we can work with Sophia, we can get a presentation set up and then bring it to you guys and have it full spectrum with all sorts of numbers in terms of charter versus buying versus events.
And
that
when
kind
you
of thing.
do the numbers thing, can you go with that bus that was 70,000 as we don't have any grants and we already have 75 budgeted? So that way we don't have to pull the rest of the money for like the $80,000 one out of budget somewhere kind of thing. If we had grants, it'd be different, but because we don't, we need to stay within the budget of what we have allotted.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay.
all right, anything else? Okay, staff reports. Charity,
I don't have anything.
do you have anything from Guy?
I do not.
Okay, Corey.
I do have a fairly complete, hopefully, update on something we talked about probably 6 months ago, which is the acquisition of the 2 properties that we need, that BNSF attempted to acquire. You approved an agreement where BNSF essentially paid for the appraisals for the potential involuntary acquisition. We now have the appraisals back. They are significantly less, not only than the property owners want, but that BNSF offered by degrees of 7 figures. So we will be bringing forward to you in the next couple of meetings 2 different things. One is an amendment to the agreement with BNSF so that they will pay also for the next stage, which is what are known as the good faith negotiations with the property owners. And the ordinance of intent to acquire, which is the formal action by you to give authorization to attempt to acquire these through condemnation. It is preliminary in nature, but I still believe one of the property owners, it's just a matter of getting their attention because they had just not responded to BNSF. The other one is Green Acres Turf Farm, and they were the original owner of the industrial park that BNSF now owns. And my intention would be once that to reach out to their attorney who we worked with in the early 2000s when the property was being annexed and sort of show him the spread in hope to avoid condemnation altogether. But those are the next steps. And again, it took a while because the appraiser frankly got sick, but we got final versions of the appraisal, and both of them, the value as determined by the appraisal is well under $25,000. And as you might recall, one of the property owners wants over $1 million. So it's a significant spread. But this is an MAI appraisal. It's the highest designation of appraiser. And so we'll be bringing that back again, all at BNSF's cost.
Okay, anything else?
That's it.
Any questions for Corey? No? Hunter?
Pump station, because I know that's on everybody's mind. We're doing staff training tomorrow on it. We had a hiccup in the alarm system that they're rectifying today. So with any luck, Friday at the latest, it will be online. And we worked up a backup plan just in case something fails, which at this point, I don't feel anything's going to fail, but we'll be able to still, tell us what you want to do with the elevated tanks. We'll have that set up as a backup. So that's where we're at with that.
And what pressure are you setting it at to start?
So right now at the station, we are approximately 50 PSI. We're going to start at about 54. So it'll be a 4-pound increase for everybody. And we're just going to kind of play it by ear. I know there's a lot of old pipes and stuff in town, so I don't want to get too crazy with this. I know the campground is a little cautious. He has a lot of issues with water lines breaking. So we're going to be real gentle with this.
So this would be the time to really put out a big push on all of our social media for people to watch out for broken lines,
Yes.
moist spots that weren't there before, anything that indicates we might have a leak.
Right. So yeah, I can work on stuff like that. We can even occasionally go out. Our meter reading system will actually show us if there's an active leak. It may be something where I can use the previous month's route that they send us, and we can do a drive around town to see if anything's popping up out of the ordinary. It will flash up with red and tell us there's a leak. So we might do that, a time or two while we're doing this as well, just to kind of keep an eye on the system.
Could we maybe put out a postcard mailer too, just to make sure everybody sees something?
Okay.
I just want to make sure everybody's
Oh, no,
aware,
I
because
think
I don't
that's
want
a great
somebody to
idea.
come back next month and go, my line broke and I didn't know it. And
Right,
so,
right. And we have to watch our side too,
Right.
It's, we've run into stuff of our own breaking, and, we'll keep an eye on it. So it's going to be, right now I'm shooting for 4. I may back it down for the initial startup, maybe 2 pounds. It'll be enough. You'll actually notice an increase at 2 pounds, but it's a little gentler on it. What's nice the way this is set up is it's all on drive. So it'll be a nice slow, it's not pumps turning on and off and hammering. So they'll be nice and slow on everything. So it should ease it up quite a bit.
okay.
I have 2 other things that I'd like to talk to you guys about. One is the bicycle track that we built around the Cedar Park. We've been getting a lot of complaints of people riding go-karts and motorcycles. I posted the no motor vehicle sign up there. I've got some others on order. That's all I had on hand. I know future growth for that park will expand into that area. Do we want to keep that area as it is for right now, or do we want to take that out?
The track itself?
I'd
Yeah.
say leave the track. It gives the older kids something to do in this town besides go to a park and
Right.
the equipment that's really not age appropriate for them.
Right. And I'm good either way. I think it's a great asset. We see, kids from their little Barbie Jeep out there driving it to kids on their bicycles, but there is complaints of people riding dirt bikes and go-karts and motorized vehicles on it.
As long as you have it posted, I mean.
Right.
Well,
And I'll be,
That's something that, maybe our police department can do some extra drive-bys by to make sure they're not doing.
right.
Because we,
And it was actually brought to my attention by Officer Martin that she'd gotten some calls about it. It's mostly on weekends after hours. They know our schedule better than we do. So,
that'd be great.
So, yeah, we'll get some more signage up around there. If you go down there, you'll see some yellow T-posts around it.
I think signage.
But it helps with enforcement.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
if the officers can roll up and say, hey, it says right here, you can't be in here on a motorized vehicle, then it just helps them. Education.
Like they do down our street.
And the liability.
The other question I have for the board is fall cleanup. The last 3 years we've done fall cleanup. We've only hauled out about 10 to 12 dumpsters. The numbers are extremely low, 100 to 150 vehicles come. Do we want to continue doing this at the cost it is?
How was this last one?
The spring was actually down this year. It was about 350 vehicles. Generally, we're 400 to 450.
What is the cost for the fall?
So a roll-off dumpster costs us about $300. Then we don't do overtime, but comp time for the guys and stuff. It's mostly man hours and dumpster costs.
How many dumpsters did we get last year for fall?
I believe we only hauled 10 full ones out.
10 full? And how many did you purchase or rent?
We start with 10, then they cycle throughout the day. So we ended up paying for 10 full, then I believe 4 drop-offs and pickups, which is $150 if they don't take them to the dump.
I would say just keep it. I think spring was down because people actually could travel again.
Right.
Fall might be back up. because
And what we
spring was
did
down.
last year with fall is we actually cut the hours back a little bit, and it seemed to work well. So maybe that's what we'll do this year. We'll continue with those hours that we had last year. Just trying to minimize my comp time coming out of my department.
Yeah, I agree. I would rather see it kept, but if nothing else, we can maybe do a big push and say that if
Or do one day, just Saturday.
you just a
Instead of
Saturday, or say
Friday
if
and
there isn't
Saturday.
enough interest in fall,
Right.
this will be the last
We actually see
one.
more loads come in on Fridays than Saturdays, especially in the spring one. Everybody rushes to get their Friday done so they have their weekend.
I'd prefer to see it keep going, but
And not, like I said, I'm good either way. I just, looking for a little direction on it. Sophia actually emailed me, so I will get a date set and we'll get the hours set and get that posted out there for everybody.
thanks.
All right, that's all I've got unless anybody has any other questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you know why the street sweeper came down Fifth Street twice last week, but did not go down Cherry at all?
I'm training a new sweeper operator.
Okay, because he stopped in front of my house for like 10 minutes and was on his phone just sitting there. So I was confused at what he was doing.
Okay.
He's
Um,
getting
Yes.
chewed up by his boss.
No, we're
I was
training.
just curious why they didn't go
One of
down
the new
Cherry.
guys wants to learn the sweeper, and it is a learning curve, and just we're getting there. It's better than last time he went out, so we're baby steps, but yes,
But
that's,
no, that's fine. I was just curious because I was like,
Right.
2 days in a row, just up fifth. I'm like, that's
we're
weird.
working on the whole route, because he'll go this street, then he'll go 3 blocks over and do a street, and I don't understand it, but we're working on that. So, but yeah, that's all it is. It's a learning curve.
Okay,
All right.
anything else? Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Jay? I just call you up after him so I can watch you bring the mic down.
I know, I just don't want him to fall on me. when I'm
Oh.
walking up here. It might hurt. We don't have too much. We were awarded a grant from Colorado Post. So we're going to try to utilize that to offset some of our training equipment and stuff. And we're back in the 1033 program. So that's a government program for equipment and materials. So we had some issues getting in there because of some previous issues we had with some applications that were put in incorrectly.
What was the grant for?
What's that?
The grant, how much was it for?
So the grant was almost $5,000. So we got that set aside. So obviously for training ammunition, things like that, it's been really scarce, but the government's released a surplus. So the problem is we have to pay the 15 cent per round shipping, which is by far less than us purchasing ammo. So we may have to look at that, using that and some other equipment. That's what it's designated for, and for the training. So
Anything?
Working with the police department for this weekend on Saturday with the bike rodeo.
right. So we have the officers available for that, and I think Hunter's got the cones and everything set up, and I guess they didn't want me to soap up the road and stuff, so we could teach them how to fall and stuff. But I guess my course was a little bit more intense than what I thought. So all our stuff is out there, so I think the bags are being made up now and everything.
I have a question. So with the events that you have officers attend, is that the community service officer that goes out and does that, or is that an officer that's on duty, or do we call another officer in to pay them overtime?
So we ask for volunteers. Most of the time it's the officer on duty. In this case, we have an officer who's new to us. He just started this last week, and he loves the community service stuff. In fact, he wasn't even here yet officially, and he had the bicycles donated and stuff, and he wants to come to that. So we'll rearrange his schedule so he's on his regular time and not getting overtime.
Okay, so they're not patrolling the streets then while they're doing that, since they're on
So
duty
there's
and we
patrol
have-
officers out too.
Okay, so we do have more than one on patrol
Yes.
at a time? Okay.
Anything else? Thank you, Jay. Daniel?
Yeah, just one thing, a rather tough subject, I mean, to be honest with you, but the planning commission, we had a planning commission meeting obviously last week. And after I went home and actually thought about it, it kind of brought up a number of concerns. One of them being long-term goals of the town. So as of right now, as it stands, we have Kingsburg is growing substantially. So they're annexing a lot of property. We have Fort Lupton's growing, and their annexations are moving this way. And then we have both Brighton and Lockbuoy slowly annexing up I-76. I have a concern that if the town doesn't investigate or discuss our current position on annexing and maybe a different route, that we're gonna wind up like, what is it, North Glen?
Boxed in.
That's completely boxed in with absolutely no space for growth, which will essentially starve us out essentially. We're already the smallest town population-wise in the area. And our only real protection against getting boxed in and for maintaining our small town feel is to create space in between us and possible future annexations of other towns. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up and say that we're more at risk now than we've been in the past 10 to 15 years. And it's going to be a very urgent issue probably in the next year or two, in my opinion. So maybe that's something we look at the surrounding towns' annexation rules and find out how they're doing it without a lot of pushback, and then maybe change ours or investigate ways where we can spread out a little bit and create that space.
Didn't we have something like that already that we had started with Fort Lupton on a,
We talked about a growth IGA with
Yeah.
Fort Lupton, but I guess to Daniel's point, there are no annexation rules. So the way to identify yourself as open for business is to, talk, depending on the type of development you want, to talk about the type of incentives you want. Because annexation is the same in every city. The rules are the same under state law. And so it's just a matter of what incentives you can provide that will make it more attractive to annex to Hudson than to annex elsewhere. And our charter requires that you zone at the same time that you annex, so that both the developer knows what they're buying and the town knows what they're buying in terms of the relationship. So it's frankly a matter of more implementing some sort of growth policy and making the development community aware of what Hudson wants to be as it evolves.
And one of the things we have done is say that you don't need to provide water at annexation now, which
Yeah.
hopefully will allow more to be at least interested. And we do have the comp plan of what we envision the town to be, but I don't see a whole lot of people looking at that or using it.
We need to get that out again. And
Yeah, I think we need to take a way more active role than what we're currently taking.
Agreed.
And I'll give an example. You've got an inventory of developable residential property that's just sitting stagnant, that has sat stagnant for many years. One possibility is to reach out to that developer if that's like the type of development you want, and talk about what it would take, because there's certainly, obviously, a huge market if that's the type of growth you want as single family. Obviously got the remainder of Hudson Hills, but making whatever your growth policies are public and trying to make the development community aware is taking a lot more active role than just sitting back and waiting for it to find the town.
And I'm sorry. I was just going to interject and say one easy way to kind of start the discussion and the conversation is to look at what's in the comp plan today. And I'm happy to bring that to the next planning commission meeting where we can start that discussion. We may want to do bite-sized pieces so that we can actually have a more hearty discussion, real life example kind of discussion about what the policies mean. You've heard me talk about the comp plan as being our pie in the sky, but it has some real implications once you see how these policies and guidelines actually play out in the ground when they're physically implemented. So I think having that conversation and then bringing it back to council and kind of giving them a synopsis of what our discussion resulted in, and maybe some next steps, options for council to consider, would be a good way to start that conversation.
And one of the things that's going to truly will help the town immensely is we're going to be the only ones around with actually fiber internet.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a big push, and that's kind of what kind of spurred the thoughts in my head that makes us more, I guess, marketable.
Yeah.
Is the right term. But at the same time, I mean, the one that we talked about at Planning Commission was an industrial area.
yeah,
And that's not necessarily, I haven't personally looked at our comp plan in great detail, which is probably a mistake of mine. I should be more aware of that. But-
Most of our industrial park now has gone to BNSF.
Yeah.
no, we have another one that's a referral from planning commission.
But that's for.
For-
Kingsford,
okay.
technically.
Yeah.
There is the opportunity eventually down the line of more BNSF down
Yeah.
south of Road 8. There has been direction given to actively go and recruit some sort of business development for the old lagoon site, but we can't do anything on it until CDOT, Castle Rock Construction's out of there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I don't have any problem with just being an ag community. I think an ag community is great, but
But we have to do more to keep the community alive, yeah.
if we don't spread, we're going to be dead.
And if we
inside of 10
do
years.
only residential, we're going to be no better off than Loch Bowie. We won't have the tax base to continue to grow. So we need to bring in businesses as well.
Yep, absolutely.
But I do think the broadband is going to help immensely because we can attract some of those businesses that'll bring in the higher revenue.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your
We just have to get it all put in.
I was going to say your comp plan update in 2018 did not foresee getting a broadband grant
Right.
and having, so there are definitely some implications to the technology in town now, and that really, and I will say that looking at your comp plan at least every 5 years, if not sooner than that, it keeps you fresh. It makes sure that, you know, these little things that come up when you get this wonderful grant that you didn't know you were going to have the opportunity for, that you are able to file it into your policies in a way that you capture whatever the next annexation or the next development is. It just in time to get it, you know, once after you've passed those policies or gotten those projects.
And re-looking at the comp plan now would be a great idea, now that we have the broadband coming in. The traffic study is completely different now with CDOT and what they've done to 52, for good or worse. We've had, since I've been on the planning commission or board or council, gone through 2 different comp plans that show an extensive trail system that has never gone anywhere. And I think if we can get something at least started on that, that would be a big push for residential developers too. They want to see a livable town.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the trail system comes up in our community like
Yeah,
a lot.
we don't have one.
Yeah,
I know
so-
Recon Events is working on that trail little outside the new park or whatever, but it's not a trail system.
Yeah, but that's just right there. And that's the
There's
thing
a
we
lot
need.
of trail space that could connect all the
Right.
neighborhoods
Yes.
as well. So that would be something.
Maybe
to
it's
look
just a good idea to, like, I think we start by looking at our
Yeah.
comp plan and educating ourselves on that, because I think the broadband is going to might even have a drastic effect on what we want that to be. So, yep, that's all I have.
And it's a really good time to bring it up and be looking at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll start that at the next planning commission meeting.
Great. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Candace?
Oh,
Joe?
I'm good.
Maria?
just the bike rodeo on Saturday and Tuesday.
Sarah? Michael? The only thing I'd like to bring up is CML is going to have a shorter conference, September 22nd through the 24th. It's in Westminster at that Weston Hotel. We do still have it budgeted for, I believe it's 3 to go, but I think this one is a shorter conference and less money because of everything that's gone on. So if we want 4 to go, just let Charity know if you're interested in going and we can get that registered for. And I do believe that's it. Citizens' comments. Anybody wishing to address the council on anything that was already brought up in the meeting? Let the record show there's no citizens left in the meeting, in the building, and nobody online any longer. So meeting adjourned at 7:07.